It's week 3. The Broncos are on to the Los Angeles Chargers after getting 28 points last week against the Colts, looking for a little bit more from their offense. An offense that is mid-table and has shown a spark at times, but a spark maybe coming from an unexpected place, at least at the wide receiver position. We'll get into that as we dive into where the Broncos stand heading into this first big AFC West test on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. A little later than usual on a Wednesday. It's what happens with a rain delay at Coors Field. Denver Football After Dark here on this Thursday morning. You see there Troy Franklin and J.K. Dobbins. That's your leading receiver and your leading rusher for the Denver Broncos through 2 games. J.K. Dobbins, of course, will face his former team this week, and Troy Franklin, I don't know if very many people expected him to be leading the Broncos in receiving through 2 games. But that's where things stand. 133 yards on 12 receptions, nearly twice as many yards as the next closest Broncos receiver, that of course being Courtland Sutton, 67 yards on 7 catches so far. And Troy Franklin, you could say, was the talk of the locker room, at least when it opened up on Wednesday. Teammates buzzing about him. So he's carried over his strong camp into the start of the season. So that's obviously a nice positive development for him and for the Broncos. It's probably, when you look at where things stand for the offense, certainly J.K. Dobbins and the way he ran on Sunday, that's a good sign. But Troy Franklin and how he's developing and how he and Bo Nix are on the same page. And now you're seeing the product of the timing that they had, the cohesion that they had at Oregon. Now it's starting to manifest pretty regularly, and now you're seeing it manifest in plays like the beyond structure downfield catch that he had on Sunday. Stuff like that, that's basically the product of the years they worked together, of Troy Franklin knowing what Bo was looking for downfield, and then Bo kind of knowing how Troy Franklin's going to break off his route. In fact, here's Troy Franklin talking about that big play when he chatted with some media in the locker room on Wednesday.
I mean, I saw him rolling out my way, and I really didn't feel my defender on me, and I kind of just felt like nobody, taking the downfield part. So I kind of seen him rolling to me, and just kind of hit in my mind to just take it upfield, and it happened. So
just see him rolling to me. I mean, it's one of those things where it sounds simple, and it's actually not as simple as it sounds, but it's a product of working together. It's a product of practice. It's a product of repetitions. It's a product of trust that builds over time, over practices, countless reps together. And there are probably going to be plenty more plays like that. But the good thing about it, of course, is that that's where you get the dynamic element of an offense. Offenses can do plenty of things within the structure of the play design, and they can be reasonably effective. But where you're really going to see greatness, where you see things actually go to something special, it's on moments like that. moments where the quarterback is outside the pocket, where he's beyond structure, moments where the receiver's breaking off his route. That's where, if this is going to become something truly special, you have to have plays like that. To me, that's the encouraging thing about the work they've had together resulting in a play like that. There should be more to come. And seeing it finally happen was probably, I mean, you could argue maybe the most positive development that came out of that game, maybe the single most positive development as far as something new that expands the possibilities of this offense. Something that's been missing. So, anyway, so appreciate y'all being here. Hello, Beavis. Glad to see you live again here on Denver Football After Dark. So I wanted to start kind of with there. I asked, say, can the Broncos find more from their offense? If they find more from the passing game, perhaps it's going to be more stuff beyond structure from Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. Starts there. You want to find more in terms of finishing drives and going full 60 minutes. One thing that was heard on Wednesday was about finishing. Mike McGlinchey alluded to that. All right. We were good for 3 quarters. The fourth quarter let up. That was something that was still gnawing at players on the offensive side on Wednesday. The inability to finish. That they moved the ball well in the fourth quarter. That was the thing. They moved the ball well all 4 quarters Sunday against the Colts. They just didn't finish the job in the fourth quarter. It's not like they were stopped cold. They still were effectively driving downfield. So, on the one hand, you're encouraged by the fact that for 60 minutes, they drove the ball well. The challenge will be different against the Chargers. At the same time, it's a Chargers defense. It's going to be without Khalil Mack, who went to injured reserve on Wednesday. So similarly to the fact that you faced the Colts without Laiatu Latu in the pass rush, now you're going to face the Chargers without a key pass rusher, their best pass rusher, in Khalil Mack, somebody who's caused you a fair amount of problems over the years. I mean, I think we can all remember 10 years ago, Khalil Mack going against Michael Schofield when Mack was still with the Raiders. Or we can remember Khalil Mack in 2019 and going against, I remember one particular matchup and an example of asking somebody to do something that was not suited to his skill set. Noah Fant out there in his second career game being asked to ISO one-on-one on the edge against Khalil Mack when Mack was a Chicago Bear. Not a good idea. I mean, one of the things that I think is always key is you should not generally ask players to do things that are beyond their capability, especially when they're young players, and I thought that was a bit unfair on that day to Noah Fant in his second career game to ask him to square up one-on-one and try to block Khalil Mack. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. So that's something, but you won't have to worry about Khalil Mack on Sunday. There's plenty of other things any other players to worry about. We'll actually dive into that in the next couple of shows here, including Derwin James. I asked Marvin Mims Jr. about Derwin James. He actually was talking about how he got to know Derwin James at the Pro Bowl last year and had some cool things to say about him. But we'll dive into that on a future show as well later on this week. So some questions about injuries. So now that we've kind of talked about the lead topic, it's all algorithmically speaking, you always want to get into the lead topic and have that be the meat of the first few minutes of the show. So now, Anthony's saying, wish they didn't overpay Dre Greenlaw, Broncos injury stats. All right, let's dive into that. Let's tackle that for a moment. So The good news was Pat Surtain was out there. Seemed to feel fine, addressed the injury, addressed his ankle status after practice. The fact that he's out there on a Wednesday, the fact that he came back and played through the ankle last Sunday, he should be on track, good to go next week when they get out to LA. So all is well there. The fact that Dre Greenlaw went from limited practice last Friday to DNP on Wednesday, that's a bad sign. That's going in the wrong direction. So he worked out on the side field. Justin Sternad, DNP with a foot. Evan Engram, DNP with a back. So not the calf injury for Engram. Now it's a back issue for the tight end. So you had Sternad and Greenlaw, both inside linebackers, both did not practice Wednesday. You still have Drew Sanders on injured reserve. So you're talking about 3 inside linebackers who weren't available on Wednesday. Now, remember last week, John Franklin Myers did not practice Wednesday, wasn't even on the field, and then was back Thursday, full go, practice Friday, good to go Sunday. So we've seen sometimes with players who have an injury that they'll just have them rest entirely on Wednesday and have them back out there on Thursday. That's sometimes part of the Broncos protocol. So that's why with some of these guys, it's okay. Let's see how they look on Thursday, whether they're out there or not. So it's always a telltale moment when we get out there and we watch the first 20 minutes or so of practice and we take attendance and we watch what parts of practice they do and we see whether they go off to the side field or not. It's always key. And then, of course, we've got all the tweets go out after practice. I've got my written report at denversports.com that go, thanks to a little teamwork with others on our staff, I get it written during practice, and then we can't report it. The injury reports, the practice statuses, they can't go up until the moment practice ends. So it is literally time to go up. The moment practice ends, I've got it in the back end of our system, and then boom, somebody on our staff hits the button, publishes it, and so it goes out live, lickety-split, as soon as it possibly can. So, but the fact that that you look on the injury report on Wednesday, and you see Greenlaw's name, and you see even Talanoa Hufanga limited and on the injury report. So you see Hufanga's name, and you see Greenlaw's name, and you see Ingram's name. And 2 of them are DNPs, and 1 of them's limited. So you had 4 major free agents that you brought in. All of them had injury concerns, injury histories to various degrees. And as my phone went off there, and it goes off again. So you had 4 players with injury histories, injury concerns to various degrees, and 3 of them are on the injury report on Wednesday. It's early. It's 3 weeks into the season. So we're not at the end point of saying, okay, this did not work. But right now, is it fair to be concerned about the statuses? Is it fair to be skeptical? Yes. Because we still have not seen Dre Greenlaw play a game snap, not preseason, not regular season. He's been dealing with quad issues of various types since April. He didn't take an OTA snap. He didn't take a minicamp snap. If you include last year when he was recovering from the Achilles, Dre Greenlaw has now missed 17 of the last 19 games since he tore his Achilles back in Super Bowl 58. The Broncos, I've talked about this various times. They rolled the dice and bet on their training and nutrition methodologies and rolled the dice on getting better outcomes because of what they do. That they were the least injured team in the NFL the last 2 years, and that they believed that they get better outcomes with these players that had injury histories. Now, the only one who has missed a game so far is Dre Greenlaw, and we're only 2 games in. So it's early. We don't have all the data yet. Things will play themselves out over time. And the number that I've had in mind as far as what I'd consider a success in terms of getting games out of them is among these 4, 50 of 68. So you can have 17 man games per player, and 50 would be an average of 12.5 per player. So if you get a total of 50 out of 68, I think that's probably about what you'd expect. As I was saying to Parker Gabriel of the Denver Post, we were talking about this on Wednesday, and I said I sort of came up with this. My thought on it was I based this on what I used to think of Chipper Jones when he played for the Braves toward the back part of his career. And, of course, Hall of Fame baseball player. Great hitter. And even, like, about 4 years from the end of his career, for a while in 2008, flirted with 400 for a good chunk of the season. But the thing with Chipper is that he had all these nagging injuries. And so you went into every season and you assumed, okay, he's going to probably miss around 40 games. So as great a player as he was, you built in your mind, okay, 25% of the year he's out. And so I sort of thought of that with these players who had these injury histories, and I said, okay, I kind of went, okay, about 12.5, roughly 25%. I said, all right. And I just sort of settled on 50 as a nice round number. 50 games for the 4 players as sort of like an over-under, an acceptable amount from these guys. So far, they're on pace to play 51 because Greenlaw has missed 2 games so far. But now you look on a Wednesday and you see Greenlaw DMP and Ingram DMP, and Ingram has had the calf injury week 1. He dealt with the calf injury in practice week 2, and now he's got a back problem, and he missed nearly half the season last year. It's interesting that so far, knock on whatever surface you can find, the guy who has been the healthiest has been J.K. Dobbins, and he's the one who's had the most extensive injury history, and he's literally missed more games than he's played in his career. Came into the season, I believe, with 41 of a possible 100 games played. So, kind of food for thought there. So, anyway, Denver football after dark here as we get into injuries. Oh man, we're talking, you can't, it's the reality of it. It's the reality of the situation. I mean, I admire the Broncos' optimism with these guys, and I'll have to go back and find the soundbite, because I did specifically ask Sean Payton during minicamp about the methodology in regards to these players coming off injuries. And partially I asked it, sometimes I'll ask a question to, because I'm curious. A lot of times it's, genuine curiosity. In this case, I was curious about kind of what goes into their decision making, their methodology about signing these players, because clearly they believe in what they're doing to take clearly calculated risks. That's what these are. I mean, everything is on a risk reward calculus. They chose to roll the dice here. And there are some teams that certainly would have looked at Dre Greenlaw, for example, and said, nope. He had the Achilles injury, and then he played 2 games last year and wasn't back, and that it would have been a hard pass for them. But the Broncos felt more inclined to take a chance because they believed in what they were doing. So the other thing is they are trying to play a long game with Dre Greenlaw, and that does in part explain why they are taking their time. But the thing is, Greenlaw was seeing plenty of practice action and was on the practice field on Labor Day when we were out there. Saw him practicing, and then by Wednesday of that week, he was DMP. Like we all went out there to watch Labor Day practice because as I often say, Labor Day's never been a day off for me in all my years covering this sport. It's always a work day. What better way to celebrate Labor Day than by working? And he was out there, and then Wednesday he wasn't. And then it's been only the limited day of work last Friday since then. So, when do we go shopping for some help at inside linebacker? Look, you saw it last year you bring in a couple of veterans, Quan Alexander and Zach Cunningham, and the looks they got at them weren't enough to where they decided they wanted to move on from any of the guys they had, and they got glances at them and then eventually said, you know what, we're going to ride Cody Barton and Justin Sternad. So I would say trade is something maybe you consider in October, closer to the deadline. See, nobody's really going to make a reasonable deal with you now. It's too early. You're only going to be able to get something of quality to help you as you get closer to the deadline and teams have a better idea of whether they're selling or buying. But even if they have a better idea of young players who are emerging and if they have a surplus, like, for example, when the Broncos traded Baron Browning because they had Nick Bonito emerging and Dondre Tillman emerging. So, and then Jonah Ellis as well, can't forget him. So they had these quality guys on first contracts, and they knew they weren't going to re-sign Baron Browning, so he became expendable, and Arizona looked and said, oh, well, he might fit for us, and we would consider re-signing him. So the deal happened. The trade market for an inside linebacker right now is probably not going to net you very much, and as we saw last year with Cunningham and Alexander, you could bring in veterans with experience, and yet there's a very good chance that none of them are going to be better than what you actually have on the roster right now. So that's another thing to consider as far as like whether there are really answers out there. It's like John Fox would say during injury-plagued seasons that he had. I recall one in Carolina, one particularly injury-strewn season in 2009, and he had a phrase he'd say, no one's coming to save us. In other words, the answers that you figure out generally have to be from within. So let's say Sternad can't play on Sunday and Dre Greenlaw can't play on Sunday. No one's coming to save you. It's going to have to be Karene Reed playing extensively. Lavelle Bailey perhaps moving up from the practice squad on elevation. It's going to have to be those guys. No one's coming to save you, like it or not. That is the reality. So you're not going to go out there on the market and find somebody who's going to be able to come in, learn the system fast enough, and actually be able to help you. Your best chance for help are the guys that are right there in your locker room who know what you're doing on defense. And the other thing you're going to have to hope is that Alex Singleton plays better. I did ask Singleton, by the way, about kind of his trust in his knee. Because, I think we can all look at the film. I think you may have seen it out there on social media. The clip where he gets to the hole, fills it, when Jonathan Taylor gets past the tackle attempt in the backfield by DJ Jones. Singleton's there, so he reads it, and he's in the right spot, and then Taylor just goes by him. So we see that, and we see some of the coverage issues, and so I thought it was fair to ask Alex whether, kind of the knee is still an issue. Is it something where you're not, are you comfortable on it? Are you trusting it? Because something you hear often from players coming off of ACL injuries over the years is that there has to come a point where you trust it. And it doesn't necessarily happen in that first game or that second game to where you feel like you fully trust the repaired ligament to kind of push off on it and everything. And Alex had a really interesting answer. He said he actually found that he got past that because he broke his thumb, because of course he injured his thumb in camp, and then he fractured it again right there at the start of the season. So he's playing with a cast on his hand, and so because of that, he's not thinking so much about the knee. He's not conscious of that, and because he's thinking about the thumb. So he said, it's not affecting him. He felt like he was moving well. He doesn't think the knee is bothering him. So it was an interesting answer. So now, as you watch Singleton, I think you can view how you see him play through the prism of, okay, he does not believe coming back from the knee injury and the state of his knee, does not believe that's causing a negative effect on him right now. So take that for what you will. So certainly it needs to be better for him in week 3 than it was in week 2. No doubt. That again, just when you see you see a play where he's in the right spot, he's coming forward. He reads it well. He's where he's supposed to be, and then the running back goes past him. That's tough. That's absolutely tough. So why not put Skinner in as a hybrid linebacker safety? Can cover the run and match it with a tight end. It's an interesting thought, and yet there's no indication that they're going to get Skinner defensive snaps. I think right now it's special teams for him, and that's pretty much it. He's down. He's down the depth chart at safety. He's behind PJ Locke. It appears he's behind Devin Key as well at safety. So, he's on the team because he's a hair on fire guy on teams. He's kind of a special teams specialist right now. He's a core 4 guy. Darren Rizzi talked about how he'd scouted him coming out of Boise on teams. So I think he's clearly one of Rizzi's guys in that phase, and that's why he's here, not so much for what he does on defense. So that's sort of an interesting thing to to consider as well. So anyway, that's, you know, I appreciate all the suggestions. Like, it's funny, like everyone's got got suggestions, but there are always reasons internally why some of these things don't come to pass. So that's one. I think that's something. Nate, you do make a good point on Band-Aids at linebacker. Like Cody Barton last year, 1 year guy, right? And then trying to figure things out. You bring in Alexander, you bring in Cunningham during the season because Singleton goes down, and you're trying to figure things out. At some point, I think you do you do need to pick a guy early. You mentioned tight end as well. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Tight end is a position that I think if Barron had not dropped to 20 and the draft had flowed differently, I believe you would have seen tight end go off the board earlier or in the draft. I think you would have seen the Broncos get a tight end on day 2 if the draft had flowed differently. It just happened to flow in a way where you had a corner that they weren't expecting to be there at 20, and then instead of trading down and maybe getting more picks on day 2, they make the pick right then and there at corner, and then it means you don't cross off every item on the list, and thus it means no tight end from a deep class. Yeah, it would have been nice to see an Elijah Arroyo or Harold Fanning Jr. developing, or Gunnar Helm. We saw Gunnar Helm have some nice flashes there for the Titans in week 1. Of course, local kid, Cherry Creek guy. Terrence Ferguson, another local guy. You know, that was I mean, there were some really intriguing possibilities this year. So it is what it is. This was the best tight end class I had seen in a long, long time. Another reason why I was hoping the Broncos would get one of those guys, because it was a need, and even though they brought Evan Ingram's not a long-term solution in all likelihood. He's more of like a 2-year contract, a guy going into year 9, year 10, coming off a year in which he battled injuries, and definitely you've seen a decline in his YPC. So to me, the ideal situation would have been having a guy develop behind him. Now, Caleb Lohner could be that guy, but he's got such a long way to go. I mean, to go for somebody that we saw on Sunday on the other side, another basketball player turned football player, Mo Alley Cox, former VCU standout basketball players. VCU, of course, doesn't have a football team. And he comes into the Colts 2017 on their practice squad. He gets out there. He doesn't get out there until year 2 and has 7 catches in 2018. I mean, he's still with the Colts, and he's been moderately productive as a pass catcher and has found a nice niche for himself there as a Colt. But certainly it took him some time. I mean, you weren't talking about this guy being a double-digit reception guy until 2020. That was his 4th season there. 1 year on the practice squad and then 3 on the 53. And that's something to think about with Lohner. I think of Mo Alley Cox's time frame when I think of Caleb Lohner's time frame. The only difference between Mo Alley Cox and Caleb Lohner is Lohner had basically 50-some more snaps in college in a season. But that's it. Other than that, they're in pretty similar spots and pretty similar levels in terms of how raw they are when they arrived in the pros. But He's made a nice role for himself, but definitely not a superstar. Solid rotational tight end who's now, if you count the practice squad year, in his ninth year with the Colts. Not, I mean, to me, if Caleb Lohner works out like Mo Alley Cox, I think you'd be ecstatic because that you get somebody who's contributing to you for a long time. But that isn't going to be enough. You're going to need someone to be an alpha. If Caleb Lohner works out like Alley Cox, then that means you've got a rotational tight end in the room. But you need someone bigger than that. So anyway, sort of my sometimes, it's my reasonable expectations thing. The Broncos, if you look around that room, I mean, if Caleb Lohner works out like that, I mean, hey, they've got Adam Troutman, who is a good kind of role tight end, blocker, solid player, good guy at the inline spot. Unfortunate face mask penalty on Sunday, but fairly dependable player. Nate Adkins, who looks like he's going to be back this week, dependable blocker. Lucas Kroll can provide depth for you. But you need Evan Engram to be productive. You really need that. And Michael mentioning Mason Taylor. Yeah, another guy that was in the draft class as well. So, boy, oh boy, oh boy. When was the last time a tight end was critical to a Super Bowl run? I mean, it's some guy named Travis Kelce in Kansas City. He's been pretty critical. Dallas Goedert's been a pretty integral part of the Eagles, and he inherited the mantle from Zach Ertz, who was integral to them for a while when they were a Super Bowl team before. The thing with tight ends is they're matchup nightmares. I mean, if we want to talk about the Patriots, I mean, they had Gronk for a long time. You could also argue that the Patriots offense during the Brady years was at its most unstoppable when they had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez there for that brief time, because nobody had the defensive personnel to stop two tight ends like that. You can figure it out with one, but two, nobody really has the ability to figure that out. And then the cherry on the sundae at the time was Wes Welker in the slot. I mean, you think back to when the Broncos were playing them, the Tebow playoff game, and it was less about Tebow struggling, even though he did. But the thing I remember about that game is, Chris Harris as a rookie and Andre Goodman out there, and defensively, the Broncos just had no answers against the Patriots pass catchers that night. None. So, and the thing is, tight ends who can really do everything you ask effectively are hard to find. I mean, it's pretty easy to find somebody who can do a bunch of the things. Adam Troutman has developed into a guy who can, contribute in pass pro, who can be a good run blocker, and he can give you a bit in the passing game, but he's not a 50, 60 catch a year guy, which is interesting because he was so productive coming out of Dayton. I think a lot of people looked at him coming into the pros and thought he could be. I thought he would actually turn into one of those Ertz and Goddard types of tight ends, and he evolved differently as it turned out. Now, here he is. He's in his 6th year, and he may well be a guy who ends up playing 10 years in the league. But he evolved into something different than perhaps the initial projections saw. To his credit, he adapted into what the league demanded of him and what his skills allowed him to be. And that's often a key to surviving in the NFL is kind of adapting to what your role becomes based on what your skills allow you to be. Some players can't do that, and their careers end up being shorter because of that. The ones that do end up being guys who have these 8 to 10 year careers, even though they don't have a lot of individual accolades. I can see Nate Adkins being a guy who has an 8 to 10 year career because he has that sort of adaptability. He's already shown that. The guy, I mean, he can be a fullback, he can be an H-back, he can be a tight end, tight end. He can actually do just enough when he gets open, and it'll help the Broncos to get him back likely this weekend based on the trend that he's on, and he had the full practice on Wednesday as well. So, yep, third down in that playoff game. Yep, in January 2012. Yeah, also one of the coldest games I've ever been to. Glad I was inside, but was outside for part of that. I remember shooting some photos pregame, and it was just absolutely frigid when I was walking around there pregame. So as that game went on and the Broncos were getting blasted, like it was one of those games where you could just tell everyone wanted to get inside and be done. No one wanted to be out. No one wanted to keep experiencing that. Everyone just wanted to go home. So anyway, Denver football after dark. Alamo on the rise with a good quote here earlier in the show that sort of defines the life of dealing with injured players at the best ability is availability. It's the old cliche, but it's very, very, very true. And and that's the funny thing with Dre Greenlaw. Can we get a money back guarantee on our free agents not playing? Just saying. Well, I mean, the contracts aren't onerous, relatively speaking, in terms of getting out of them in the future. So, I mean, you're not looking at, it's not like a Deshaun Watson type of deal. So it's not too bad, but not great. As Cecil Lammy would say, not great, Bob. So anyway, want to throw something in here real quick. Just wanted to throw this soundbite here in from Bo Nix talking about Troy Franklin. And go back to Troy Franklin for a moment. Here's Bo talking about his former and current teammate.
He's starting to develop into the player that everybody, ultimately knows he can become. He's, I've mentioned he looks a little bit, as comfortable and confident as he looked in college. I think that's starting to show. And I knew he always was going to have that in him. And, it's good to see him with the self-confidence to go out there and make those plays and continue to do it and play the whole game like he did. And so, I expect a lot. Not necessarily more because he did, a lot. So I expect just consistency from him, and I know he's going to give us everything he's got.
I like that. Like, first, the consistency, but second, that you're now getting to kind of see what he was. See, this is a thing that happens with players as they get comfortable in the NFL. When they get past that initial hurdle of getting everything down mentally, what happens then is you see their natural skills kind of come to the fore, and you start to see what they look like in college reveal itself in the pro ranks. And so I think that's now what's happening with Troy Franklin, the speed, the dynamic ability, now that he's kind of through all the mental stuff that gets thrown at you as a rookie. Once you've kind of gotten past that and adapted, now the natural skills get to take over, get to reveal themselves. You can make, and You started to see that with Bo Nix as well last year, but I think it's really on display right now for Troy Franklin as he's emerging. So Troy Franklin can save my fantasy season. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Interesting question here from Beavis. The strategy of value and free agency in draft's always the best way. Sometimes you go for broke and get a star. Well, you have to balance things because you are trying to build a roster, and the cap gives you a finite amount of resources. So you can't simply say, okay, we get a star here, because if you go like for broke and get a star, then you spend a lot on a star in free agency, then you end up sacrificing. Or if you give up a lot in draft capital, like if you do what the Packers did, and you give up a lot of draft capital and cap capital and cap space for Micah Parsons, that's well and good, but you're going to have to make up for that with budget-friendly options elsewhere to compensate for all that you're paying. So, like, inevitably, you're going to have value additions somewhere. It's just, can you spread that around? So you're always trying to find places where you can have like a differential advantage. Thus, the Broncos said, okay, where can we have an advantage here? They felt they had an advantage with their strength, conditioning, nutrition to say, all right, if we can get better outcomes for some of these players coming off of injury, we can go get these guys who maybe don't cost as much, and maybe we can get some bargains here on players whose value might be a little bit depressed because of their injury history, but we're going to get more out of them, and these players will end up being steals for us because their value was down because of their injury history, and then we end up getting more out of them because of our methodology, because we have better ideas and because we can maximize them. So that they're basically leaning into their methods getting better results and thus maximizing the value. That this is something where they can get more. They can extract more because of something they're doing differently. So I actually see that. I see why they're doing it. And I don't think they're in a value strategy. I mean, like you paid an awful lot for a guard in Quinn Miners. I mean, they're re-signing players. What they're doing is they're re-signing them early, so they're getting out ahead of the market. They're acknowledging the reality that the Broncos failed to acknowledge in the 2010s. That if you kick it down the road, they're not going to get cheaper. The Broncos had this habit of just saying, okay, we're going to, we'll wait. These Broncos are taking the philosophy that for years the Packers took of saying, we're going to re-sign the players as early as possible. We're going to focus on keeping our own and re-sign these guys early, because we understand if we like them and we want them back, let's get them done before their value kicks up if they have another good season. So Nick Bonito, for example, you get him done when his contract is still in the Josh Hines Allen range or the Brian Burns range. But if he has another 13 and a half sacks, his contract would have gone toward at least the Max Crosby range. But now that he's done, if he has another 13 and a half sack season, then you've gotten him locked in at that lower rate. So that's the thing that you're doing. So it is a little bit of value, but you're spending, but you're acknowledging the reality of, all right, if these guys keep playing at this level, they're going to get more expensive. I mean, Quinn Miners would have been more expensive if you'd waited 4 months because he had an all-pro season. He would have you would have probably added $3.5 million a year at least on to Quinn Miners' deal if you dawdled and waited. You would have added. Imagine if the Broncos, because with Surtain, they did it way early because he had the 5th-year option coming too. So the Broncos could have waited until after this year to get PS2 done because he could be playing on the 5th-year option right now. Imagine if they had waited until this year to start talking about a PS2 extension. Think of how expensive it would have been now coming off a DPOY year. Instead, we're talking about Surtain actually being value. Dare I say, great value. So, Beavis, respectfully, you take the value, you're talking about value as a negative. I'd say it's actually a positive here with one of the things they're doing, with what they're doing here. Like, by getting these players locked in, and that means you can have star quality players, but by getting them done early, you can have more of them around because perhaps, you take cornerback, you take PS2, for example, and I'm going to look up the cornerback contracts here on Over the Cap. So just 1 second while I look that up here. As I just totally typoed that here as I was looking that up. So, PS2 right now, he's sitting on 24 million APY average per year. So, right now that's 5th among corners. If the Broncos had waited until now, you'd be talking minimum for PS2, minimum $30.2 million a year. Your APY on PS2 would be at least $6.2 million per year higher. I mean, that's not insignificant in terms of a chunk of your salary cap. I mean, you take $6.2 million. I mean, for example, that's more than your Evan Engram cap number this year. That's a little less than your DJ Jones cap number this year. DJ Jones is 6.6. So think about that. That's the money that you saved by getting PS2 done last year as opposed to now in terms of average per year is your cap figure for Engram, or it's Benito's cap figure this year is $5.849 million. Greenlaw's cap because they put some of his new bonus on this year. Yeah, that's what you're talking about here. That's why don't say value like it's a bad thing. Value is a good thing. So anyway, already looking at potential inside backers. If they go get Leo Chanel, he's pretty good at blocking kicks. All right, Beavis. I think I got you to come around there. So, all right. Although we'll draft him, free agents aren't very good. No, I'll take. You know what? I'll take Leo Chanel. I'll take Leo Chanel. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, you don't want to dawdle. Jerry Jones dawdles. Don't be like Jerry. Jerry Jones Jerry Jones does not know what he's doing as an owner. He knows what he's doing when it comes to making a buck. He knows what he's doing when it comes to the Cowboys being an entertainment property. But when it comes to running a football team, nope. Not at all. So, anyway, so let's see. Denver Football After Dark here on this Thursday morning. Lavelle Bailey, he's still a Bronco, still on the practice squad. So, imagine that Lavelle Bailey would be elevated if Sternad can't go and if Dre Greenlaw can't go on Sunday. So that would probably be the most likely outcome, I would imagine, in terms of what they do in the lineup. So, so that's sort of where things stand right now. Inside linebacker, questions. Tight end, questions. Not too many questions at receiver. Optimism about Troy Franklin. Optimism about getting more out of Cortland Sutton. But the questions at inside linebacker and tight end. Man. Questions when you went into free agency. Questions now here 2 weeks into the season. I mean, to go back to an earlier thought that came up in this conversation, you're not talking about a trade now, but certainly in a few weeks, if things aren't copacetic at those positions and you start seeing teams out of it, I think you consider that, but not too much in terms of draft capital. I mean, you do. I think you need to be prudent. I still like Kenyon Sadiq for this team in the first round next year, the Oregon tight end, because I'd like to see them solve tight end for the long term. I'd like to see them find a complete tight end, a good pass-catching tight end who can be there for the long haul. I do think they'll re-sign Adam Troutman. I think Troutman's one of those guys who's going to kind of remain in the room for a while, and he's good to have in the room. And I think Nate Adkins is a guy who's going to have a nice little multi-dimensional role in the room as well. But the tight end draft, there are some guys. It's not as deep as last year. I have not studied the inside linebacker group yet, so I can't give you a real good feel. I can't give you a real good feel on it yet. Like I said, there are some tight ends, but it's not like last year. Last year, for example, you knew there were at least 2 first-round tight ends last year in Loveland and Tyler Warren. Sadiq's probably a borderline first-rounder right now, and there aren't nearly as many day 2 caliber tight ends as there were last year. So this is not last year's class at all. So, all right, Denver Football After Dark here on this Tuesday morning here. Going to wrap this up here after just under an hour. Going to have more Thursday night. We're going to talk more about the Chargers game after Thursday night football. Of course, a very interesting game coming up there. The Miami Dolphins continuing to spiral, and we'll get a look at them on Thursday night against the Buffalo Bills and see Mike McDaniel on the hot seat. It's Thursday morning. It's Wednesday. It's Thursday morning everywhere because at least in the continental U.S. It's still Wednesday night in Hawaii, but it's Thursday morning where we are. It's 1:30 a.m. as I record this. So we'll talk more about the Chargers Thursday night. Friday might be a little interesting to give you a programming note on Denver Football After Dark because I've got an early flight on Saturday. You can also look for a shorter video on this channel on Thursday morning about Troy Franklin and some thoughts from teammates about him and also the offense. That'll be going up Thursday morning. So look for that on this channel, and I'll have a couple of articles at denversports.com on Thursday as well. So make sure you check those out. And of course, Cecil Lammy and I will be on Orange and Blue Today on Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m., breaking things down from Thursday. We're going to hear from the coordinators. Very curious to hear from Vance Joseph. Very curious to also hear from Darren Rizzi in the wake of the leverage thing on Sunday. It's 2 weeks in a row with major special teams gaffes for that unit. So that's something of a concern for Darren Rizzi in his first season as Broncos special teams coordinator. Not off to a good start for his phase there so far. So plenty to discuss, plenty to dive into as this week goes on. So we'll have all that covered here and, of course, at denversports.com. So be looking for that. Appreciate you joining me here on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If you know people who might enjoy this sort of Broncos chatter, tell your friends. And I'll have more here on Thursday night after Thursday Night Football. So appreciate you joining me. Take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next edition of Denver Football After Dark, and I'll see you Thursday at 5 p.m. also on Orange and Blue Today. Take care. Thanks for watching.